as you mentioned, Mark, Adam has rejoined the European Union and lives with my two lovely nieces, also his daughters, and his lovely wife, who's also a lovely sister-in-law, in a very beautiful rural part of southern Moravia. And you might see, as you see him talking, I will let him, that he has created the ultimate man cave in his garage. He has a fire heater in there and a big screen, and it's a refuge, but it's also where he's been spending some time rowing. And one of the things that he was really excited about when he started rowing was the data that was coming out, because yes, we do love football, but we're both work in quite technical businesses, and we enjoyed talking about data. Adam liked talking about his progress, and I liked looking at the dots. And when we looked at the first sort of T30 days, because this is a CSV file you get from them, we could see that he was starting to tail off a little bit. The bit that's in a square further on is after we sort of hatched our plan. But it was very sort of flat. And, as the football season was starting to come to an end, the hour and a half, 2 hours that he'd spend rowing and watching was, it was starting to be, well, what's going to sort of motivate me now? So last year, could you see that? Sorry, where's your shared window?
We can see EPL analysis 1920.
Brilliant. Right, I can't, but that's fine. I can find it. So last year I did, inspired by you, Mark, actually, I created the English Premier League. It was an analysis of which were the best positions to buy players for if you've got a fantasy football league. And it's quite a serious business in our house. You have to donate 12 bottles of beer to the person who wins, and there's a team of about 10 people. So it's quite a big thing. And as I say, it was inspired by you, Mark, and you will, I'm sure, notice with your attention to detail that the colours of each of the bars are actually the Pantones of each of the teams that are featured there. So I was looking for something else to sort of kick off the season and enjoy myself with. And can I move a slide down? Can you see that? Because I'm now completely in the dark.
One more.
Oh, wait. There we go. Found it.
Mapping out the data.
Yeah. So we started having a play around with what we could do with the data. And first, obviously, with ggplot, we grouped the data and we looked at kind of how much he was producing every day. And then we looked at kind of, well, how far away was he leaving his home, to see whether that would be a way to sort of stimulate and keep him focused on what he was doing. And Adam, maybe you want to sort of explain a little bit about why you were a willing participant in my folly.
Yeah, great to be here, and thanks very much for giving me a platform to showcase what was a reasonably significant achievement in the last 100 days for me. But as Charlie was mentioning, the rowing was starting to tail off, and one of the good things that the manufacturer of the rowing machine Concept 2 do is they have various challenges across the year, and the one that kind of kicked things off for me was called a mud season challenge, and during the month of April you had to row a minimum of 10 kilometers a day for 30 days. I kind of went a little bit mad on that and did significantly more than the minimum 10 kilometer requirement, and I ended up being the person with the most number of kilometers in Czech Republic by the at the end of that month.
For which you got a T-shirt, right?
I didn't even get a T-shirt. They were so mean. I just got a certificate which I had to print out myself. But anyway, leaving that aside, I thought, yeah, this is quite cool. I can actually do this sort of thing. And as Charlotte was mentioning about the data, that was one of the really cool things about Concept 2 is that you have a virtual logbook, but the numbers which kind of and the kilometers were adding up, and that's fine, but they're kind of losing a bit of context. So I did need a bit of a kicker. The last time, we at work, I work for Oracle. And we got quite a close-knit team, and one of my closest colleagues is in Barcelona. And pre-COVID, the last match I went to see live was Barca play at the Nou Camp, and that was a fantastic evening, and lots of memories. Similarly, he's a absolute passionate Leeds United supporter, so much so that, dare I say, after supporting Spurs for, gosh, best part of 40 years, he even got me thinking, yeah, you know what, Leeds are onto something here with Bielsa. So that was kind of, I don't know, things sort of came together when I was speaking to Charlie about doing a challenge, and we suddenly thought, hang on, White Hart Lane, yeah, maybe, but doing something further up north, Elland Road, and it all kind of stemmed from there. So that's when the conversation started, and that's how things got going. And then there was some other extenuating circumstances which kind of pushed the 100-day limit onto it, which won't necessarily go into now, but we can discuss it another time. But yeah, that was where we thought, right, okay, we're going to do this in 100 days, and how am I going to do it? So yeah, over to you, Charlie.
And so for me, as I've mentioned, I've worked in marketing for a long time, and about 6 years ago, I went back to university to study for a master's in data analysis, which was very sort of database relational database. Sort of, it was a brass tacks and a lot of SAS. So I left sort of knowing lots of things that would be great in a really big company. And actually I work in sort of smaller startups. I work a lot in health tech. So I don't know how many of you are involved in the NHS and the health industries within the UK, but a lot of that tends to be summarising data and reflecting and reporting and predicting on what might happen. So I was quite keen, and I also work in sort of audience intelligence. So that is a lot of sort of pulling data in from the ONS, Twitter, trend analysis, and just trying to build up a bit more of a picture of what motivates people, where they live, and why they why they're behaving the way that they are. So if both of us felt like this could be a really interesting thing for us to do. Mark, did you want us to summarize? We can sort of carry on, don't you think? Or I'll just keep going on. So yeah,
keep going on.
Yeah, so the first week, Adam bought a whiteboard and a new outfit, and sorted out the man.
Major contribution to the project, that one.
Yeah, really. And we also had a look at GitHub to see what other people were developing with the Concept 2, and everything was really flat. It was, how to connect it with the Bluetooth. There was nothing really there. So it did feel like there might be something for us to look at and to create for other people. Who knew? At the beginning of a project, you've always got very clean ears and you're receptive to the possibilities. The first thing I did was I mapped the major league football clubs in the UK, Germany, Scotland and Spain, and then just constricted it down. So created a bounding box that was slightly smaller, so I could start to see, what we were playing with, really. And the first thing was we realised that we were going to need some more stadiums. There wasn't going to be enough to get us through France, and so we needed to go out and find some more. So that led us to doing some web scraping, which was something I had not done unsupervised before, which I know is almost a bit of a joke in data, but no, I hadn't had someone there telling me what to do. I went into Python because research had sort of led me, or other people's opinion made me think that Beautiful Soup would be the right thing for us to use for this. I looked at RVest, which is the comparative package in R, and I used Parasite, which is the add-on that you can put into Google Chrome, which allows you to see which elements of a website contain which content. And once I'd done that, I realized that most of the names of the football teams and their addresses were in one particular element. And I just went into curl, and to be perfectly honest, I was quite brutal and just ripped that out. But I have to admit, it took me about a week and a half of playing around to realize that that was probably going to be the best way. So we started to think, okay, we've got you going from one place to another, but Adam only had finite amount of time, and there's only so much you can get out of somebody when they're having to row. So we weren't going to be able to get him to visit every single one. So we thought, okay, well, let's think about the traveling salesperson's dilemma, which is what an awful lot of companies, particularly with COVID and an increase in sort of home delivery, are using to optimize the amount of parcels that they can deliver with the time and the distance that they have available. And it's a heuristic, which I'll mention a little bit later. But this is just the formula that sort of that summarizes exactly what's going on. And it's seen as being an MP heavy problem, hard problem, because of just so many. It's almost like concatenating each different node in order to work out what's the best or most optimum route. Now, for us, or rather for me, what was really tough was trying to find a algorithm that was out there that was targeting the optimum amount of stations or stadiums as opposed to the minimal amount of distance, because we had an agreed amount of distance that we knew we were going to go with. So spent a bit of time reflecting on that, and I think that's something when you're doing independent learning like this, rather than sort of recreating a precedent that's already out there, is you do have to think on your feet a little bit, and also kind of reduce your ambition. There is definitely something about what you hope you can achieve and what you can achieve, and that's definitely a learning that came out of it, I think, for us both. So I happen to have seen a talk by Fabrice Durer, who's from the Royal Mail, about 2 years ago, where he described it. So it wasn't something that I just happened to know. I had seen something and I knew about this problem. And he had, I think this was now I look at this and I go, of course. But he showed the tech stack that they used in order to optimize Parcel Force's delivery. Now, of course, I only had one agent, Adam, but it does sort of, it is something to remember when you're doing something like this, that there are full-time employees working on these sort of problems. But my blackboard at home that is usually not reminding me that I need to buy tea and nuts and celery, etc., got transformed into thinking about what we were actually trying to do here. And so there is a couple of things that you think about when you're looking at the salesman's problem. You have the agent, as I mentioned, who's Adam. Then you've got the trip. So we initially started with Elland Road to New Camp, or Camp Nou. Then you've got the desire line, which is as the crow flies. Then you've got the nodes, which for us was our stadiums. And then you've got the route. And so you need to sort of understand where you're going to take people, and obviously with him being quite low to the ground on a rowing machine, we decided that being on a cycle highways or cycle paths was going to be the best way for us to do that. I am going to reference here this book by Robin Lovelace, which is incredible. I'm on about the 7th time of reading it, and I still don't. I probably only understand about 20% of it, but there are some great tutorials, as you try and get the rust off and you try and start to work out how you're going to solve this, ridiculous problem that you've set yourself whilst your brother's tracking up the hours and miles on the other side of Europe. So one thing that I definitely learned is that Google can't save you. There are quite a few packages out there that rely upon Google's API. which is all great in theory, but there seems to have been something that's happened in tech dev in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, how lucky for us, which means they've got quite buggy, and the people that were supporting them are no longer doing so. So that can be quite frustrating when you're running loops of quite long, you know, quite big groups or relatively big groups, and when it's quite a lot of computation, you know, actually the other thing I probably have to remind myself is make sure you get the latitude and the longitude the right way around, because that can also add to it. So GMAP's distance, when it works, is great, and it helps you to work out the distance between different nodes, but actually SF library, which is part of kind of the graphic, the quite basic R packages, is the thing that actually came through in the end for me. And this is the distance matrix that I've created. So these are points that I've found that are between Elland Road and White Hart Lane that we were able to plan a route around. So I mentioned earlier on that the desire line that we initially had was from Elland Road to Camp Nou, but actually what we ended up doing so that we could take in the geometry and make sure we didn't spend too much time in the water was we broke that down into smaller routes. And what that also allows you to do is you have a bit more, you don't have to spend so much time making tea whilst you're waiting for the computer to chug along how it is. And this that I've pulled from my Notion just points this out, really, that Google, you know, doesn't give you that much bandwidth. And when you think about the amount of computations that you're doing in order to work out the distances of each from each other for a nearest neighbour, you know, it becomes very big very quickly. So there's, with heuristics, I do have a GitHub resources page, because there's a huge amount of tutorials, and there's quite a few hundred hours, well, definitely I think 100 hours that's sort of gone into where we are right now. You know, just learning and getting a real grasp on something that is complicated, but there's a huge lot of really passionate people that are involved in this. But so heuristics, you know, you sort of start off thinking about intuition, where you think is going to be the best way, and then you plot out nearest neighbour, and nearest neighbour, you know, is literally where you go from one to the next, and you keep reiterating until you come out with the best route that way. The ant colony is where you shuttle you basically shuttle the weightings between one place to another until you come out with the most used route. And then this space filling curves of combinatorial problems is essentially where you just, I'm not, obviously the modeling is doing it, is where you draw around, you cross it, you turn the all of the nodes, you basically turn into a box, and each of them can only have one node in them, and then you work out the route to go through all of those boxes using these space filling curves, and that then gives you the route around. Obviously we had a starting and a finishing point, we weren't going back to the same point. Then the other thing that really came out of this for me was talk to the API. So initially, as I mentioned, we wanted to work with the cycle highway information, and the best way to do that is with OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap has, it's an open source. They have a really good wiki on all of their development and features, and it's a really, really granular piece of information. What I would say though is it takes up an awful lot of memory, and this is one of my comments to myself as I'm writing some of my scripts are quite funny. You know, this one almost works. I think I had about almost working for about 4 hours, and what it was trying to do was bring down 6 gigs of data, because France is very, very well populated. So what I then did was I went over to this thing which is called Overpass Turbo, which is the the OpenStreetMap's API, and that allows you to basically just do a bit of sort of feature engineering, a little bit like what Chris has shown us with where he's been creating queries in DAX. You can start to say, right, this is going to be my bound box, and you can pick that out, and then you can start to add in features. So whether it be, for example, highway, and the value is that it's a cycleway. And so it's a good place to play around with it. I spent some lovely time, and actually I should have put it in, looking at cinemas in Barcelona and building up some lovely maps. And you can get something going really quickly, and I think that's really important when you're working in something that's a bit new. It's there's nothing like a good visual to kind of spur you on. So I would definitely recommend having a play with those. And the other thing that we started to realise was there were ways that we could build this. We could totally feature engineer. So obviously, if you go onto Google and you click at White Hart Lane, because you were a bit hungry, weren't you, when you got to White Hart Lane, Adam? How far into it was it?
I think that was in the first couple of weeks. It was like 350 kilometres, so I was a bit peckish by that time. Yeah. And
so the thought of us being able to pull in data on where you might be eating felt like a good end to the day, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was virtually tempting. Yeah, and you were just waving it under my nose, seeing as we haven't got fish and chip shops in the Czech Republic. But yeah, it was a nice touch. I appreciated that.
Well, I think you appreciated more that rather than going for Deliveroo, we found again through GitHub that someone has pulled the whole of the Michelin star guides for the world, and those include the reviews too. So again, we were like, oh, this is something we could definitely do with this project. So some of the takeouts, that feels like it came around really quick, didn't it? Well, one of the things that I would say is that I've learned so many new tools from working on this project, and that's been really good. The other thing that's also been great is that it's made me quite platform promiscuous. So I've always thought it was quite church and state, in that you must be sort of R or Python or Tableau or Power BI, and actually sometimes it's like, what's the best tool to get this done? And it's also allowed us to sort of have reasons to be geeky together. I mean, that's what we were talking about, weren't we, Adam, yesterday? That it's been good for us to be able to kind of go, oh, we could look at that, and that might be a new way for us to.
Yeah, that shared experience side of things was really helpful.
Yeah. And then we've had this mutually iterative sort of feature development too. That we've. It's really helped me to sort of understand the tools and like you said that it ended up with a lot of what we were talking about ended up being on your whiteboard.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the first sort of main challenge for that I wanted to get to is I wanted to row from Elland Road to White Hart Lane. So that was like chapter 1. But then when I visited Portsmouth football ground on the south coast, then that was a second one, because it was like, hang on, we're about to cross the channel. And then when I got to Caen, the equivalent of Caen, and visited that stadium, it was like, yeah, actually this is really happening. I'm actually doing this. So that was really cool. And I got enthusiastic, and I must admit I got a bit too over enthusiastic and started cropping out Google images of the actual stadiums and then sticking them on the whiteboard. But that got old quite quickly, and I think I ended up with 3 or 4 of them pasted on the whiteboard. But those little tricks, I think, had really helped along the way. I think this side of things was really cool, just to keep you plodding along, because it's not the easiest thing to do, is just sit in your garage pulling a chain and a handle for 1,600 kilometers. So this was really useful.
And so projects are never truly finished, are they? So we've got quite a bit that we're starting to talk about doing for next year, and how we might evolve this. So it's been good. One thing it's been good for is kind of developing sort of my personal sort of data project management. So like how do I use the tools that are available like Notion and GitHub and my scripts, and learning how to make them a lot cleaner and tidier, because a lot of the tech stuff, a lot of the coding that I do, nobody else really sees. And it's made me realize that there are reasons why things should be tidy and organized. And I would definitely say that you should start before you're ready. I think you can sometimes read too much around a subject before you get going, and actually hands-on learning is the best sort. And don't be impatient when and tutorials are great. We've got so many of them out there. Don't be impatient, because I learned from my mistakes, which is, if you go off piece halfway through, you're thinking, oh, I know what I know, I'll go off and do that. You're actually missing out on a lot that you'll learn towards the end, and it's better to follow something through to the end and then work out how you can acquire and use that information. And find your data wherever you can. I was lucky that Adam was prepared to fuel me with data throughout the summer. But there is data wherever we are, and if you can find something that has a story that people like Mark are interested in hearing about, then that certainly helps. The project design versus delivery, I mentioned this before, and that's definitely something I've taken away from this, is that the ambitions that we had were so massive, and going into next year, what we'll do is we'll start simple, we'll build an MVP, and then we'll work out how we can improve upon it, rather than thinking I can't start it until I've worked out how we're going to integrate that API into Shiny and have it as part of our tooltips with the map. And as I did mention this before, don't compare yourself too much with a project that's got sort of 20 FTEs, because they will always be producing something slicker than you are, because that's what they're being paid for. Always keep an eye on the fact that this is the reasons you're doing this is because it's you're expanding your own abilities, not trying to compete with a big team. So I won't be off to take the Royal Mail's details yet. So we've got, as I mentioned earlier on, we've got there's an awful lot of scripts, and we could have done a session where I had literally just shown you how to pull out geolocation details from the football stadiums. But rather than doing that, what I've got a lot of scripts that we're uploading onto my GitHub, onto my repo, and then we'll share those with you, so that it's really just a reference guide if you ever want to know some more about how we've pulled this together. And Adam has very kindly offered to also include his data set. So we'd be really interested in what you could do with a time series study or something in this. And then also within that is a list of packages that have been really useful that I've thought, oh, this is much better. For example, Plotly, I only found it this week, but I think it's a really amazing piece of software. And once you understand, I'm sure most of you understand how to use the structure of JavaScript. It's just so much easier than some of the other pieces, and the interactivity of it looks really flash. So bigs for that. And Data 36 I'm going to mention because I've never taken their course, but their tutorials and their teaching, particularly on how to set up your system, because I use a remote server, are really good, and that's on my hot topics all the time in terms of how do I just log into my iTerm2, etc. Adam. It works on mine.